awesome. Thank you.
And then, and yeah, there's a person who can't come because they're like 2 hours of drive, and so they'll have the video available. And there's another person in Maine.
Be downloaded or something.
Well, they can watch it online. Like go to YouTube.
Okay, I've heard of all these things. I don't have the equipment.
Yeah, that's
Sometimes it's just as well for me to stay off that stuff, but it's certainly a tool.
You hit the nail on the head. It's about whether or not it's a tool and if it's useful. And people get lost in the technology for the sake of it. Oh, I need the latest or the greatest. It's like, well, you know. Somebody was just asking me the other day if I needed a nail gun to do a particular job. Like, could you do that if you had a nail gun? I said, I can just do it with a hammer.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
The simpler the better, unless of course it's helpful.
Yeah. Thought I checked everything, but I missed one.
I don't know how you get all that stuff.
Yeah. All right. Check 1, 2. Turn this one on. Check 1, 2. All right. So, welcome and slating for the recording. My name is Bob Arnold. Today is September 25th, 2013, and this is class 2 of a course called The Art of Interpretation, which is 4 classes on Wednesday evenings, and this is the second one. We're at the Wisdom's Heart Center here on Cape Ann, Massachusetts. And so this class, just to review, is the art of interpretation, and it's based on sutra or teaching that the Buddha gave, which one way of translating the title in Tibetan, it's called Tangye, which is figurative and literal, and it's then based on a text that one of the great Buddhist scholars of Tibet named Tsongkhapa, who's pictured in this thangka behind us. He's the person who taught the first Dalai Lama, and he wrote a commentary on the sutra that the Buddha wrote, or the Buddha spoke. The Buddha didn't write it down, and most of it was oral, was transmitted one person to the next. And then Tsongkhapa is a great prolific writer. He learned Buddhism he lived in Tibet and wrote about 10,000 volumes, I think, all kinds of stuff. And one of them is this book that we're using as the source. So, and it's called the Essence of Eloquence. This part of the title. I don't actually have the whole title here, which I should. I'm here somewhere. Oh yeah. The Essence of Eloquence, a classical commentary on distinguishing between the figurative and literal. So the literal and figurative being what the Buddha talked about. And so, to put it in context, in Buddhism, there's something called the 3 turnings of the wheel. And we have a wheel over there, the wheel of Dharma, and that represents a number of things. And Dharma is a word that is Sanskrit, although it's becoming popular in English. And it has many translations. A good one is the truth. It also means existing things and other stuff. But a good aspect of it is to think of it as something that can be useful and helpful. So not in the sense that if you're hungry or thirsty, a glass of water would be helpful, but in the sense that it's true. So if somebody says, you should, if you want a car, go steal one. Yeah, it'll get you a car in the short term, maybe, but it's not a useful teaching. It's not really helpful. It's kind of a dangerous attitude to have. So Dharma would be true attitudes that are useful. Hey, Mary. And there are great religions that have survived the test of time. They've been around for years. And those are the Dharma. So it doesn't just mean Buddhist. So to be more specific, you could say Buddha Dharma. That's Dharma that's taught by the Buddha and then passed on in a Buddhist lineage. You could say Christian Dharma. They don't usually use those words because Christians don't speak Sanskrit, and it's not typical, and it wouldn't go back to some text that they translated from there. But if you wanted to say, oh, well, I'm a Buddhist and I study Sanskrit and Tibetan and English, or, I'm thinking, oh, Buddha Dharma, would there be something called Christian Dharma? Sure, same thing, So that's just to put some of those who are defining our terms so that we're not getting lost in just lingo. So when the Buddha spoke, he spoke the truth. And so when he got awakened, sometimes they say the word enlightened, awakened, there's a number of ways of translating or defining those terms. We're talking about a spiritual practice as a way of being happy, learning to be happy. And if you were permanently happy, in other words, nothing disturbed you, the sky could come falling down and be like, oh, I'll figure out what I need to do and I'm not going to get upset about it. That's one level. That we call heaven, call being liberated from the things that bother us. We're free from mental afflictions, things that bother us. The Sanskrit word for that is a klesha. I think we mentioned that one last week. It's a cool word. It even sounds like it might be irritating. Klesha, I'm having a klesha. And I'm having an irritation of my mind. Something's disturbing my mind. And that's where it comes from in the root in Sanskrit. It's to disturb, klesh. And so something that disturbs our peace of mind is a mental affliction. That's an English translation. So we'll say either klesha or a mental affliction. And we want to get to the point where we don't have any of those. We're free from those. That would be pretty awesome. And that's the goal. And that's actually the goal of all spiritual traditions. They just use different names for it. And they use different paths to get there. And where we get into trouble is that we think, oh, my path is better than your path. And so we'll take a minute to talk about paths. I am a firefighter. It's one of the things that I've done. So we learn how to get out of a building, and there's different terms. One of them is, oh, we want to evacuate the building. That means we go into the building and we get people out. You have to leave, but we're going in and we're going to do our job. But then it escalates and they say, to get out of the building, it goes up another notch. And then there's a term called abandon. They start blowing the air horns repeatedly. And it means, well, whatever you're doing, stop and get out as fast as you can. So if you hear a command to abandon the building, you don't fart around. And you go, oh, wait, I'm going to go. It's like, there's a window, there's a ladder, there's a door, there's a stair, let me get out. And you're going to find the fastest way out. Because it means something is bad is going to happen. Like the building's starting to collapse, or the roof is going in, or something's bad. And if you're on this side of the building, and you radio down and say, hey, we're on the A-B corner of the building, and we're on the 3rd floor. It's like, okay, great, we'll put a ladder up to your window. Go to the front corner right there. Great, we'll get you out. Now, somebody over here in this corner of the building might not find those instructions very useful, because maybe the center of the building has a big stairway and part of that roof is collapsed, and they can't get from that corner to this corner. And the person over here, and so they've divided the fire scene up into different divisions, and this division over here on the C side of the building is being told, we want you to go down the stairway in the C side and then go out the 2nd floor window, because after that the floor is gone. Okay, great. Different set of instructions. Same goal, get out of the building. And you're not listening on the radio going, oh, well, those guys are going to that corner and they're taking that stairway. Let's follow their instructions, because it's not going to work for you. You can't mix and match. You have to use the instructions that are appropriate for you. Because you're in this corner, you can't follow the instructions that work over here. The people in this corner have to follow those instructions. They're both true, but the instructions for these people are not true in the sense that they're going to be helpful for these people over here. And in some ways, I mean, it's an analogy, and so you have to kind of put it together and apply it. In some ways, a spiritual practice is like that. We have a tendency in the West to be very self-centered and very prideful about what we know. Oh, I know, and I'm just going to listen to that teaching from the Dalai Lama, and I'll take some of the stuff. But then I'm not going to pay attention to the other things he said. And then I'm going to go over to this church, and I'm going to listen to what they said. I'm going to use some of those instructions, and I'm going to do it without really putting any common sense to it. And I'm just going to pick and choose. So maybe the instruction is go down one flight and then out a window. But these people aren't supposed to do that. They have to go up one flight and out a window. You know, and they go, well, I don't want to go up. That's too much work. I'm going to go down. Those instructions might not work. So you can't pick and choose. And initially, when you start to seek a spiritual goal, like I want to be happy, I'm going to look for things. We can read self-help books. We can try things on our own. We can go to different meetings of different organizations and groups and try different things. And some of it will be like, it doesn't make sense to me. And other things will be, that makes sense. That clicks. I like that idea. And then you, at some point, have to pick something and stick with it. So you don't want to be like a little bee bouncing from flower to flower, going, well, let's go here, let's go here, let's go here. At some point, you have to pick something. And we're all on that path, somewhere between, I don't need anything and I'm fine, not realizing that you're in the burning building. Where in Buddhism they use the analogy of the teachings are like medicine, and the Buddha who gave the teachings is like a doctor, and we're like the patient. And we're sick, and we need the medicine, and we need the person who gives us the medicine, and then we have to take the medicine. And the medicine is the instructions, like, don't hurt other people, follow the, 10 Commandments, or, do a 6 times a day book, or read this and study this, different teachings. And that's what we're supposed to do, is take the medicine. And then people go, oh, that's an interesting analogy. But when you really get right down to it, they say it's not an analogy. We are sick. We are sick in the way that we misunderstand our world, and the misunderstandings we have are causing us to get old, causing us to get sick, and causing us to die. And unless you're somebody that's outside of that cycle, then you really can't debate that you're a patient and you need to take your medicine. Because otherwise you'll get what everybody else gets. You'll get old, you'll get sick, and you'll die. And you go, well, yeah, but how can you not have that happen? I mean, most of us forget that it happens to everybody, and we assume it's not going to happen to us. Except, well, yeah, I know, really it will happen, but so much later, I'm not going to think about it right now. And we put it off. And then we don't want to go to the other extreme and say, well, okay, there's a way to put a monkey wrench in that system. What would that teaching be? I mean, this is what they say, the way to heaven is to practice, or to get to nirvana, or to become a liberated or a free person. They're just different words. It all means that there's something that's outside of that cycle. And in Buddhism it's called samsara in Sanskrit. That's the cycle of suffering life. Because in Buddhism we posit the idea that we're born over and over and over again. And then in many countries that's just like, yeah, of course. And in this country we think, no, I don't believe in that. But, there are some people who are very secular who don't believe it at all. And then there are some people who don't believe it because they say, well, it doesn't match my religion. And if you really dig down, you go, well, what does your religion say? Well, I'm going to die and go to heaven. Well, isn't that another life? I mean, it's just weird, It doesn't mean you're going to be you again like Bill Murray in Groundhog Day until you get it right. So, you have to think about what's my motivation. What do I think is possible? Why would I study a spiritual teaching? Why would I try to put something into practice? Do I think it's going to help me? And, the big goal would be I want to become free, liberated, get to heaven, go to nirvana. Oh, no, I shouldn't say go to nirvana, because you don't actually go there. It's not an exit off the freeway. But, there again, you can say, well, are you being literal or are you being figurative? We have that sound, oh, yeah, they go to nirvana, get to nirvana. be in nirvana, achieve nirvana. However you want to think about it, depending on the level you want to dig down and pull that teaching apart. So if we think even that's possible, or maybe it's something a little less sucky than this life is possible, then you say, okay, well then that would be a reason to try something. And then that's what you do in a spiritual practice, is you try something. So you hear some teachings and then you put them into practice. And what most of us do is we say, oh yeah, all right, meditation's supposed to be good, so I'll meditate. Yeah, well, tomorrow I'll do it. Well, all right, I'll say, all right, this weekend I'll devote Sunday. I'll spend an hour meditating on Sunday. And finally, after like a week, you carve out an hour and you meditate. And you're not very good at it, and you haven't practiced, and then you say, oh, okay, well, I'm busy during the week, so I'll carve out some time more next week maybe. And then a week goes by, and that's not a real practice. That's just kind of dabbling in things once in a while. You'd be better off meditating for 2 minutes a day, every day, than 2 hours once a week or once a month. And the same thing with a spiritual practice, is you find some piece of the teaching, you say, okay, I'm going to put that into practice. I'm going to think about one thing for the day, even if it's just a little bit, so that you gain some momentum, and then you start to see, wow, maybe there's some truth to this. Maybe this stuff works a little bit. I'll try it a little bit more. And then things get a little bit better, or you start to see some kind of a change, and then you get a little motivation. You say, well, this works. I'll do some more of it. I'll practice this some more. And then you go get more teachings, and then you practice some more, and you put it into practice, and you struggle with it. And Jason Kappa said that if you're finding yourself falling off the path or stumbling off the path, that's a good sign that you're on a path. And that's more than most people. But we have a tendency to go, oh crap, I made a mistake, I didn't meditate for the last 2 days, or I forgot to do my book, oh this is horrible, oh I suck at this, I better quit. Instead of saying, wow, I had something that was good, and I'm working at it, and I'm getting better at it. There's one teacher who likens us to junkies. We are really good at wanting the things we want, and they're usually what's causing us pain in the long run, and we don't realize it. And we just keep wanting more of it, and we don't see how it's hurting us. And then we get a little teaching, and we go, well, I failed at it. I can't do this. And you say, well, you're really good at your other habit, because you've been doing it all your life, or countless lifetimes, not understanding how things work. And you think, what, it's going to change overnight? I got a teaching, I'm just going to turn on the light switch and be happy. I mean, you can do that, but it's pretty hard. So simple doesn't mean easy. And another group of these teachings all relate to yoga. And nowhere in the Yoga Sutra or any of the yoga texts does it say the definition of yoga is easy. You have to work at it. You have to have a practice, and you do it consistently over time. You see the results, you go, now I have a little confidence that this works. Then you're happy to do it some more, and you can put it into practice. So that's a little bit of thought about why you would come to a class and listen. And motivation should be to find something that you can put into practice in your life right away, not just go, oh, that was interesting. And so the Buddha, when he taught the first turning of the wheel, said some stuff along the lines of, well, life is difficult, life is suffering, however you want to translate it. There's a cause to that suffering. It isn't just random, and we talked about this last week, that things aren't random. Did you try that at all, thinking about that?
I did. I put a little thing up in my kitchen.
Cool.
This too is caused.
Yeah, good. So there you go. You're putting it into practice. And then, so he said it's caused. And if it's caused, you can put a wrench in that system by not putting the causes into place anymore, or putting other causes into place. So if what you're getting you don't like, figure out what's causing it and stop doing that. The old joke, you go to the doctor and you say, oh, doctor, it hurts when I do that. Doctor says, well, don't do that. It's kind of like that. At one level, it's pretty simple. I don't like people stealing from me. Well, don't steal from other people. That's the cause of you having your stuff stolen. or lost, or, I don't like people yelling at me all the time. My boss is always yelling at me. Well, you yell at other people. You kick the dog, you yell at your kids, you yell at the traffic and the other driver. It's like, these are not foreign things to us, but we just don't put the connections together. And the Buddha said that there are things out there in the world. Then, later on, he gave a teaching at a place called Vulture's Peak, where he taught what they call the Heart Sutra. It's a very famous text. And pretty much pulled the rug out from that set of teachings and said, nothing exists. Nothing has its own self-nature. There is no pain, there's no suffering, there's no cause for suffering, there's no path to the end of suffering. It's like there's nothing, And so later on, someone said, hey, Buddha, first you said that things had a nature of their own. And we talked about the pen. The pen has its own nature. The pen is a pen. Then you said the pen and everything has no nature of its own. Nothing has any nature of its own. I'll get it out just in case we need it. I was going to write some notes anyway. So, and then this person said, so when you said nothing has any nature of its own, what were you talking about? What did you mean by that? What the heck? This is like you're seeming to say one thing and then something else. So when you said this other thing, what did you mean by that? And then he explained what he meant by that. And that's what we call the third turning of the wheel. So the first turning of the wheel is that things exist, life is suffering. Now, it isn't that he said that and then never said it again. He said it to different audiences. So it's not like chronologically he taught this, then he learned something, so let me teach this is new, or I learned new stuff, and then he learned, wait, I learned something new, let me change it. It was depending on the audience. So I try to think of different ways of understanding these things for me. So I think of it like, and I don't have good real life examples, but let's pretend there's a writer who writes a book like Harry Potter, or like Star Trek or something. Harry Potter is more, I don't even know what genre you call it, but Star Trek, science fiction. So somebody writes a science fiction book, and then they, get a good review and they like that, and then they decide, I'm going to write a mystery novel. I'm going to write something like, Robert Parker Spencer for Hire. So I'm going to write a mystery novel. It's a different genre. Now, it isn't that they're not going to go back ever again and write another science fiction book. They might say, I have a new idea. I was sitting on the beach enjoying my royalties and I had a new idea. And I thought of something and it was in outer space. It's another science fiction book. So it's kind of like that. But they get sold to different crowds. And some people will go, I like that writer. I don't like his mystery stuff. So it's a little like that. Not a perfect analogy, but it helps me. So maybe that's useful. So you can think of it like that. The first turning of the wheel is one genre. Things exist. Second turning is nothing has any nature of its own. And then the third turning second turning of the wheel. And the third turning of the wheel is what they call fine distinctions. Where he said, you got to put a little common sense. When I was saying the second turning of the wheel, what I meant was, and then he explained some things. And so this is the idea of literal or figurative. Was he being literal or was he being figurative? And then it depends on who's asking the question and who's listening to the answer. So some people would say, when he wrote, or spoke rather, the second turning of the wheel, and he said nothing has any nature of its own, he was being literal. That's the way it is. That's the real deal. So when he gave the third turning of the wheel, he kind of rolls some of that back. They go, but then he was being figurative because some people couldn't understand it. But then there are people go, no. He was being overly exaggerating and figurative in the second turning, and the third turning he was being literal. So it depends on what hat you're wearing, what school. It's not like Buddhism, the schools of Buddhism are buildings where you sign up and you go to that school. It's kind of like, I'm in the mood to go to a movie. And what kind of movie you want to see? I want to see a comedy movie. That's the mood you're in. So that's a genre. I'm not in the mood for a comedy. I want to see like a love story. Different genre. Different interpretation. So each of us, as we go through and study any spiritual tradition, will be wearing different hats depending on our level of understanding and what happens. So there's, classic example of a guy who goes into a cave to meditate for 10 years, and he's going to become enlightened, and he's studying and meditating by himself in the cave, and someone comes on and goes, "Hey, somebody in this cave, what's going on?" He goes, "Be quiet, I'm meditating." And he's like, "What are you meditating on?" "I said be quiet." It's like, "Yeah, but I'm curious, how long have you been here? What are you doing in there? What are you meditating about?" It's like, "Will you go away? I'm trying to meditate to learn to be patient." And he gets all angry. And you realize, oh, okay, need a little more practice. So it's the same thing. We'll hear teaching about the people that are annoying us are coming from us, like the pen and chew toy thing. Oh, I'm being annoyed, and that comes through, and you start thinking about it, and you go, oh, okay, yeah, I understand. You can even apply it to your own life. Oh, yeah, that guy that I go into the meetings, and every time he does, oh, I see how that can come around. Yeah, okay, what goes around comes around, I got it. And then you walk out, and someone cuts you off in traffic, and you go, what a jerk! Out there, self-existently, they're a jerk. And you forget the teaching you just had 5 minutes ago. So we'll slip back into our old habits, and that's another way of saying we're slipping from one school to the other. When we hear a teaching, we go, wow, pen and chew toy, it's coming from me, not from the pen. And then later someone stabs you with the pen accidentally, and you go, ouch, jerk, pen from its own side, and you forget it. So just another way of interpreting and understanding some of the things. So another question to ask is, when we look at the different teachings, is it an academic exercise? Oh, the Buddha said this, and he was being literal or figurative. Well, if you're wearing this school hat, this set of lenses, this kind of understanding of the teachings, oh, well, it was figurative. No, when he answered the question and said he was being figurative, he was being literal. No, he was being figurative when he said he was being figurative. Oh, so, it's like, it's a little bit of a difficult exercise. And you say, well, why do we need to do that? Why can't we just learn to be nice to other people? Because ultimately that's going to wear out. It's hard to hold up when the fourth or fifth irritating person of the day comes along and does something that irritates you, because we're so habituated, and then we're just going to be annoyed and forget why we're annoyed, and we fall back into that cycle, and because we're planting seeds all the time by everything we do, we're going to see them as annoying the next time they do it. And so we have to work at it, and we have to understand, why is it happening? Why are we doing the things that we're doing? How is it coming about that they're annoying to me? And so when we look at this stuff, we want to understand a couple of things about the idea of literal and figurative. One is, what kind of things do we mean when we're saying literal and figurative? So the first one is expressions, things that people say. Someone gives a teaching and says, I don't have a mother and father. Jesus said that. Was he being literal or figurative? Those are the words he spoke. Then there's things, so let's stop and we'll just list them first. So expressions, and then there's reality, what we'll call for this reality, like this is a rock, this is a cup, that's a camera, that's a computer. Those things, are those things being literal or figurative? And you go, well, that's kind of silly, wouldn't, a pen is a pen. It's reality, it's a pen. What else would it be? How's it going to fool me? How could it be figurative instead of literal? So that's why I brought a little example. So, and then understanding.
We're trying out the school of Zen.
So, now we could a little Zen garden, a little rake. Yeah, I was going to make it fancy, but we'll just leave it in. And then the last one is understanding. Does the way I think about it match reality? And that comes to our understanding about things. And so we'll go through those one at a time. So the expressions, or like we talked about them last week, when the Buddha said, kill your mother and father. Or when Jesus said, I have no family, that's not, they came along and said, hey dude, your mother and brother are outside. I don't have a mother and brother. I don't have any family. You're my family. Were they being literal or were they being figurative? So what did they mean? So the Buddha didn't mean go get a big club and beat up and kill them. He meant if you have to separate yourself and say, look, they're getting in the way, they're not helping me, the home life is interfering with my ability to understand and get myself out of suffering, then I gotta go do something about that, like leave. Okay, and then reality. So we say, well, that's a pen. It is a pen, and I can write with it, and I can take notes on my paper. So that's not fooling us. That's being literal. And this is we say, well, coffee cup. Well, there you go. Stretching it a little bit. It doesn't have coffee and it has tea in it. Okay, so a coffee cup, tea cup. So it's not literally a coffee cup at the moment. It's a beverage cup, thermos cup. So we're a little bit flexible with those things. Now, what about these rocks? Can't see them on the screen. There's a rock. And a rock. And this rock is being figurative. You go, well, what does that mean? Well, it's not really a rock, it's a hide-a-key. See, you open it up, and it's a rock on one side, and it's a hide-a-key on the other. You can put a key in there, I don't keep it. And so you can put it in your garden, and put a key in it, put it in your garden, and it is figuratively a rock in your garden, but it's literally a place to hide something that you can then get into your house and get out of the rain and get warm and get back to your life and stuff like that. So there's an example of what we would call reality being literal or figurative. And we're already 99.9% of the time thinking reality isn't figurative, it's literal. And it just is what it is. So then the third one is our understanding of things. And the lines between these will blur a little bit. Because you say, well, I understood that was a rock, and but I didn't have a valid perception. What I saw there looks like all the other rocks. I didn't think it was a lollipop. Oh, I licked it and it was all dirty and cold and rough. Then I realized it wasn't a lollipop. I mean, that would be like, when you're drunk or something, I didn't have a piece of potato, and you're just confused. That would not be what we would call a valid perception. Something's interfering. 99% of the time we're having what we would call valid perceptions. What we're seeing is what's out there, but that doesn't mean they're correct perceptions. That's a story for another day. Then there's the approximation. So maybe you have a perception and or an understanding of something, but you're not quite sure. So you got this pen and chew toy thing. You say, well, okay, I understand there's a pen and a chew toy, and the really deep understanding of that can actually help me end my suffering permanently, somehow, really, because the understanding of that concept is what we call emptiness. I like to think of it in Buddhism, it's like the Buddhist holy grail. That's what we're chasing after. That's what we're trying to understand. That's the experience of that we're trying to have, more than just, pen, chew toy, sure, I can get that. It's a little fuzzy the first time you hear it, and then it gets clearer, and then its approximation is just like, well, kind of, sort of, I know what you're talking about. Or someone's giving you directions might be a good one. Say, you go down the street, and it's like, yeah, I kind of get the gist of what you're talking about. There's a gas station or a big building, yeah, I can remember some. Then when you get there, you're saying, okay, I hope it'll click for me. I've been here once, and I'll go, oh yeah, now I see what he's talking about. So you don't really quite understand what he's saying. And so you have an approximation in your head of your understanding of what someone's saying. So those are other ways of thinking about literal versus figurative. So do you understand what I'm saying? Yeah, and it's like, well, not literally. I couldn't actually describe or write out, like Google Maps, what you just said, but I get the gist of it. I'm going to go that way for a while. Then I'm going to turn a little bit, and then I'll ask somebody else for directions. Okay. And so when we are trying to decide if somebody is being literal or figurative, there's 3 tests. And the Buddha, when he talked to people that were studying with him, he said, look, I don't want you to believe what I say just because I'm the Buddha and I said it. And when we do teaching or listen to teachings, we can't say, oh, well, this is a rock. Why? Because the Buddha said so. Well, how do you know the Buddha wasn't being figurative? We still, it's like just because he said so, we still have to be careful. We're always testing it. So all of a sudden you're like, wow, I thought one of the valid perceptions was if there was an authoritative source told me. And so if someone says the Buddha said so, that should be an authoritative source, then you got to add another level to it. All of a sudden that rug's been pulled out. You're kind of like, oh, now I got to ask, were they being literal or figurative? So is it an authoritative source literally or an authoritative source figuratively? Whew, just got a little bit more complicated, didn't it? Okay.
You're just pulling your leg to prove a point.
Somebody asked the question, well, why did the Buddha say kill your mother and father? What was the point? Why didn't he just say, they're getting in the way, leave the home life? Because he was trying to go to an extreme to exaggerate to prove a point, as you said. Because it's there's a really cool book called A Whack on the Side of the Head, someone wrote, and they give you examples of like really stupid things people said at business meetings or other times, and you go, oh, interesting. And then something good came out of it. And there's a person who designed a series of buildings, and everything got built, and the foreman or general contractor came and said, okay, we're all ready now. We got to know where you want us to put the paths. We're going to pave the paths, and then we'll put down the grass. Like then we're almost done. What should we do? And he said, just pave everything with, not pave everything, put grass everywhere. Plant the entire thing with grass. It's like, what? No paths? What are you, crazy? He said, yeah, go ahead. And then we'll come back in a year and we'll follow the part people walked in, and that's where we'll put the paths. So it seems kind of contradictory to what people usually think. So sometimes that sort of whack on the side of the head is helpful. And that's a reason somebody might say, kill your mother and father. You're like, whoa, hang on, what's he mean by that? And then it makes you think. So to notice the immediate question is, what do you mean by that? Instead of like, oh, okay. You go, what do you mean by that? I got to think about that. Whereas if you just said, if you're not doing well in your spiritual life, leave the home life. And you're like, yeah, sure, maybe I'll think about it. I don't want to, And you're not going to really think about it. So it's a way of getting you to jump in the deep end and really think. So when you're trying to decide if somebody was being literal or figurative, the Buddha said, test it like gold. And there are 3 tests. You burn it or melt it, cut it, and use a touchstone. And those represent, check it against your own experience. Oh, they said that was a rock. Well, I picked it up and I already know that it's kind of light and it has a plastic bottom. It's not a real rock. So it doesn't match my experience. So when they say that's literally a rock, you go, well, no, that doesn't match my understanding of it. They say it's a rock. Well, you must be figurative. So we're talking about, take those rocks and put them somewhere. You wouldn't say, oh, well, you were being literal, so I'm only going to take 3 and leave 1 on there. It's like, well, you meant take all of them. Depending on what the person's asking you to do. Kind of means check it with logic. So, let's see. The Buddha said it's very important not to harm other beings. And then the Buddha said kill your parents. Logic would say that he couldn't mean both of them literally. And I've only heard him say kill your parents once. He said don't harm other beings many, many, many times. I can apply the logic that he probably emphasizes the things, well, but then sometimes they might say other things, so I'm not sure about that. And then you debate it back and forth and you think about it and you say, well, wait a minute. Could he mean something else? Well, if he was being figurative and he said kill them as in cut your ties with them, but don't do harm, well, maybe they'll be unhappy and that would be harmful. Yeah, but I have to judge which is going to be more harmful. If I don't get to enlightenment, then I can't help them. If I can't find the exit out of the burning building, I can't help you. So, and you put all those pieces together. You use some logic. You debate it. Debate it with yourself, debate it with other people. Say, okay, then it makes sense. Then I can follow that. But don't do it just because someone said so. And as soon as somebody says, how dare you question me, then a bell should go off and you're like, whoa, this person's a little too isolative or dangerous. Whereas the Buddha is telling you right out of the gate, check what I say, test it like gold. Now he's not saying trash it and doubt it and call it bad. He's saying, make sure you understand it. Yeah? So if this is the pen, and then this is what I want you to do is to understand the pen, well, take it apart, put it back together. He didn't say distrust it and break it, and he didn't say just accept it for the heck of it because I said so. It's like, oh, let's take it apart. Oh, I see. Oh, there's a refill. Oh, I see this. Okay, great, got it. I understand how it works now. Okay, I have a deeper understanding of it. I chewed it apart, pulled it apart, analyzed it. Okay. And so the idea of principle of literal and figurative is useful all the time. All the time. Yeah. Especially when you listen to commercials. This is the best car ever. It's like, are you being literal? There's never been a car, it's like people being figurative and over-exaggerating. Or maybe they're just lying. I don't know. You have to decide. But we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. All right. Okay. To talk about all right. So in this next section, we're going to be talking about two genres. I'll use the word genre just kind of interchangeably with schools of Buddhism. Because I think schools, for me, it makes me think, oh, there's that building and I applied to that school and I got admitted and I went there and I studied there. And there's a bunch of people that all wear this color robe and they went to that school and they had that mascot and played football against this school. And that's not the way the schools of Buddhism are. They're ideas or levels of understanding. This is probably a more useful thing, I think, to think about them that way. So the two schools that we're going to be thinking about right now are called the mind-only school, and which is kind of a literal name. I mean a figurative name, because it doesn't mean everything exists in your mind. They're not there. They're the ones rolling back going, hey, it doesn't all exist in your mind. There's stuff out there. There's real stuff in the world. They're not, so it's deceptive. If you're not careful, you say, oh, mind only, they must believe that everything's in your mind. They believe in the mind only. That's not what they believe. Okay, and we're going to talk about emptiness, which was the pen and the chew toy thing that we talked about last week, and the understanding that one school, the mind-only school, has about emptiness, and the literal and figurative teachings of the Buddha, and the middle way school. So sometimes you could describe the middle way school as being in the middle between two extremes. Like, this is a rock and it's only a rock. This is a pen and it's only a pen and it exists from its own side and it's always been that way. And everybody would see it as a pen. And anybody who doesn't is just wrong and misunderstanding it. That's one extreme. Then there's the extreme of, well, nothing exists. It's all just in my mind. I can do anything I want. Nothing matters, which is stupid and dangerous. And then there's the middle way, is things exist, but they don't exist the way we think they do. Like, I thought this was a pen, but then I started thinking about it, and the dog chewed on it, and I realized, oh, to the dog it's a chew toy. It's coming from me, the pen. From the dog, it's coming as a chew toy. So the middle way would be thinking that things exist, but they don't have their own qualities from their own side. Nothing in the world has any nature of its own. It's all coming from me and the karmic seeds that I planted, which gives me great power in my future. It doesn't give me any power in the moment when bad stuff happens, because it's already happened. Like the farmer who bemoans the crop that is being harvested in the fall because it's not what he wants. It's like, well, then you shouldn't have planted it in the spring, but you did, so it's like this now. But what are you going to do next spring? Oh, next spring I'll be wiser and do something different. Now I'll plant better seeds next time. So the mind-only school asks, so a person asked the Buddha, hey, you said everything exists, then you said nothing exists. It's just quickly summarizing them. And what did you mean by that? And then the mind-only school says his answer proves that we're right. And the middle way school says, no, his answer proves we're right. Because one says he was being figurative then literal, and the other one says he was being literal then figurative. When he said it and then answered why he meant when he said it. So that's part of what we're trying to figure out. And we're looking at what he talked about in terms of, what do you mean that things don't have any nature? And so when he turned the third turning of the wheel, he was explaining what he meant, and he broke it out into 3 kinds of things. The first one is, I'll tell you the Tibetan just because it's fun. It's called a kuntak, and that means a mental construct, an imaginary thing or a construct of the mind. So we're not talking about the cup, we're not talking about the pen, we're talking about something that's in my mind. So there are some mental things that are only in my mind. Like right now, I'm seeing a 3-headed purple elephant over in the corner there. And I'm like, well, that's only in my mind. There's no 3-headed purple elephant, right? I mean, they don't even exist. So that's an imaginary thing in my mind of something that doesn't even exist. But right now, I'm thinking about the Eiffel Tower. Oh. So that's a construct in my mind, but it relates to a thing that exists. In this case, something I've never seen directly, but I've seen pictures, I've seen it in movies, I've seen it in books, I've seen photographs, I've heard people describe it, but I've never actually seen it. So that's yet another level of complication there. But basically, it's a construct that somehow relates to, at least I have authoritative sources that tell me that there is such a thing as the Eiffel Tower. It's not like a unicorn. When people tell me, oh, I saw a unicorn, and it looked like this, and I have a mental construct of a unicorn, but it didn't come from an authoritative source that said, yes, I actually saw one. So I have authoritative sources that tell me there's an Eiffel Tower, and I have a construct of it. So the mental construct exists only in my mind, but it can relate to something that does or does not exist. Okay? And so when the Buddha was saying that nothing exists, he was talking about things like that. Well, they don't have any nature of their own. They're just mental constructs. Of course they don't have any nature of their own. They don't exist by themselves. They're only in your mind. They're not out there. You can't go find a unicorn. So that's what I was talking about. And another aspect is he was saying that nothing grows through a nature of its own. So if something, there's a number of ways to talk about this, and again, this is just a sort of overview of something that's a very deep subject that people study for years. So, we're just touching on some of this stuff. You can call them dependent things, cause things, changing things. Those are synonyms. In one school, in another schools, they're subtly different. So depending on how you're thinking about that. So a dependent thing is something that has a nature of growing from causes and conditions. In other words, it doesn't just pop up on its own and grow all by itself. It's not self-existent in that it just grows. It has to have causes. So, for example, you plant an acorn. It's not that you can put the acorn on the tile floor over there and all by itself it's just going to grow into an oak tree. It has to have other things causing it to grow. It's not self-existently by itself an acorn that just, it's kind of like, in cartoons you see this all the time. You see self-existent things growing from themselves. You just throw the acorn down and poof, you get a tree. That's a thing that would grow on its own. But that doesn't happen. He's like, well, that's what I meant. The acorn has to be in the ground, it has to have warmth, it has to have sunlight, it has to have moisture, it has to have good soil, it has causes and conditions. So of course I meant it didn't have any nature of its own. You got to help it out. Now remember, we're switching hats. So that's the mind-only school saying, yeah, see, that's he was being literal when he said that's what he meant the first time. This is an explanation that he was saying that, see, there are things like acorns out there, and there are things like earth and sunlight and water, and those things interact, and those are out there in the real world, in reality, not in my mind, and they happen by themselves, but they have causes and conditions. They don't happen by themselves like the magic acorn that just poof becomes an oak tree. I think Jack's magic beans were like that. They didn't need causes and conditions, although you could debate that and go, well, Jack had to take them out of the bag and then, plant them, which then they magically grew without the causes, it's like, but again, it's a fairy tale, so, and they don't exist anyway, so it's like, how much do you want to debate them? So, or that's according to one school. The other school would say, of course there are things out there, like acorns. They exist, and they grow, and they change, and they are existing because of their causes and conditions. They're dependent on their causes and conditions. Not just my mind. And then those dependent things, in Tibetan, the term is called shenwang, which you don't have to remember. It's just fun to say it. And that literally translates into other power. Shenwang means other power. So they are powered by other things. The acorn didn't become the oak tree all by itself. It was powered by the other things, the causes and conditions, the things it was dependent on. Okay? So yeah, it didn't exist and have a nature all by itself of an acorn becoming an oak tree. So, okay. So you see the mind-only school is not so bizarre, and they're definitely not everything exists in my mind. That sometimes people just don't understand what it means. They go, mind only, that must mean that everything exists in your mind. And that's exactly what they're saying doesn't happen, isn't the case. So and then the third thing the Buddha was talking about, he says, well, I was talking about things have no nature of being ultimate, which is the mind-only school talking about emptiness. Pen and chew toy. It's empty of being a pen. This thing is empty of being a pen. It's coming from me, is what we talked about last week. And the Buddha is saying, well, so here's where we get to, if you understand the pen and the chew toy, emptiness, if you understand that at the level of having a direct experience of it, which only happens in meditation, which is a plug for why you should learn to meditate, because then you can have that experience. These are the Christian mystics. They have that direct experience of communing with God. They meet God directly, or they see God directly. In some Eastern religions, they say, I had an experience with Krishna, and there's great stories of Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita and a couple others. Little stories about baby Krishna is a good one. He's a little baby and he grows up into a teenager and he moves the girls and then he goes into an adult and does all kinds of things. And so we see all aspects of our lives represented through Krishna in the stories we could read about him. And one of them is as a baby, several of them, he was a little playful little baby. I was getting into trouble. He'd steal the butter. Krishna the butter thief, but he's a cute little baby. And it's like, oh, what a nice little baby. So we, did develop a sense of devotion. Oh, he's a nice baby. We all go, oh, And so we get a little sense of love. And he opens our heart. What a cool idea. So as a little baby, he's playing around in the yard and his friends are there. And then he eats some dirt. And his friends go, oh, you shouldn't eat dirt, Krishna. And he's like, oh, shoveling the dirt in. And they go, I'm telling your mommy. So they go, Mrs. Krishna, baby Krishna's eating dirt. So she comes over to say, why are you eating dirt? And he's like, He's like, open your mouth. Open your mouth, young man. Open your mouth or you're going to be in big trouble. And he goes, ah. And she sees the cosmos. She just looks at her, because he's the master of time and space. He's Krishna. He's God. He's, however way you want to think about it. And so that's, from a Buddhist perspective, and we would say, oh, she had a direct experience of ultimate reality. So you have to put it in words that make sense for you. She saw God directly. She was experiencing emptiness directly. How do you want to think about it? She had a divine experience. And this is what the mystics have happen to them. This is what Buddhists that get into deep meditation, yogis have. They call it a yogic direct experience of Oh, pen, chew toy, ultimate reality. Oh, I see. It's empty of being a pen. What does that really mean? At a really, really deep level. And when you have that experience, someone will say, wow, what'd you do this morning? Oh, I saw emptiness directly. Really? What was it like? I can't put it into words. But it's kind of like, this is how people describe it. And there's people in all the great religious traditions that have these kinds of stories. It was amazing. I don't have words for it. But then they try and tell you what it was like. They're all just facsimiles that are pointing towards something, but they're not the something. That's another way of talking about different schools, different religions. In Buddhism, the moon is an image, a representation, an icon for emptiness, understanding of emptiness. So we could say all these different things are just fingers pointing at the moon. Oh, look, the moon, the moon, the moon. But they're not the moon. They're just fingers pointing at the moon. They're all different fingers. And then they get into wars going, well, my finger's better than yours. It's like crazy stuff. None of them are the moon. We want to have that direct experience. So there's just metaphors. So why is that important? Because it will change you so drastically, you will then get to the point, you're on your way to ending all of your suffering. So in Buddhism, kind of crossing over to Christian terms, that's kind of like your ticket to heaven. Think of it that way. You get the ticket and you're on the train and the train's going to take you there. In Buddhism, they call it a stream enterer. You have entered a stream, and it's like you just ride the stream now. You know that there are a number of things that are really important that happen. One is you understand at a level beyond, well, okay, pen, chew toy, got it. Dog sees it as a chew toy, I see it as a pen. Okay, that's emptiness, great, that's easy. What's so big? You understand at a level where it's way deeper than that. And you understand that the teachings that you've gotten are correct. You're going, oh, okay, yes, this isn't just an academic exercise to understand, well, why does the mind-only school say this and the middle way school says that, and it's just, words and you're just being, arguing about semantics. You realize, oh, it's not just subtle distinctions. It's the difference between seeing emptiness and not seeing it. And now that you've seen it, you know, wow, I know that I'm getting to heaven. I see it. I see the goal. And you have a direct experience of it. You know that it's possible. In fact, you know that it's not. Well, we could all know it's possible if we believe that we all have what we call Buddha nature, or that we all have the same ability to have that happen. We all have the same ability to get to heaven, but we doubt that we're going to get there. Well, the person who has seen emptiness directly knows they're going. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And it's just a couple more lifetimes.
But in the meantime, there's good stuff too. A lot more.
And it is possible, there are teachings where it's possible to do it in this lifetime. But you got to really amp up the teachings, and you got to practice really well. And there's a lot of people who just kind of dabble, I'll just read a couple of books and maybe meditate once in a while. That's not going to do it. Or I'll study some of these courses, but I'll skip 15 and 13 because those are about logic and what the Buddha meant. That's too complicated. I don't need to it hurts my brain. So you got to get to that level where you're struggling. And eventually you get to that level where it's not struggle, it's just fun. You're doing it, but you're doing it is the key. It's the people who aren't doing it who are going to do what? Same as everybody else. They're going to get old, they're going to get sick, and they're going to die. And there's no way to stop that. So, again, that's from the Buddhist perspective. So the key to stopping that is understanding emptiness. Understanding the distinctions between when the Buddha said there's no self-existent things, what was he meaning? Put on your middle way hat and say, oh, this is what he meant when he said that. Put on the mind-only school hat and go, well, why don't if the mind-only school, according to the middle way, because we're in a lineage I am in a middle way school. So I don't ascribe to the mind-only school. So I could very easily go, well, why would I want to learn this? This is wrong. It's not quite there. It's like the car that doesn't have the carburetor. It's almost all there. There's lots of parts. It's worth, $50,000, but it still doesn't have the spark plug wire. One piece missing and the car doesn't work. It's that subtle a distinction. It's like, why do I need to know about that? Because if you understand it, then you understand that you're always, for the most part, thinking like a mind-only school person. There are things out there, and they have their own nature. And that's what's going to prevent you from seeing emptiness. So if I can understand it really well from their side, it'll help my understanding, because I go to that school. I had that mascot. I had a middle way mascot. Oh, okay. So why would I go study at the mind-only school? They got the wrong football team. I don't root for them. Why would I do that? Well, because I want to understand their understanding, because they're not stupid. They're just second best. Think of it that way. They're pretty darn close, but it's easier to understand their stuff. Then you can go understand your stuff better. Again, that's the mind-only school versus the middle way school, depending on which hat you're wearing. Now, the middle way school says, yes, we want to understand the mind-only school because they're not correct, but it's helpful. And then we can understand our stuff even better. And we'll see emptiness directly, and we'll get out of jail. We'll get out of Dodge, get out of suffering. However, the mind-only school just says, well, we're right. Those guys are goofy. They think, there's nothing out there, and they twist what the other guys say, and they misunderstand it. And they say, well, we're right. And the Buddha spoke this, and that proves it. So that's why you have to wrestle with it. So it's good to think about your motivation. Well, is this stuff useful? Or is it just an interesting exercise? If it's useful, then we want to keep doing it. And you say, okay. But again, this material comes from course 15 of a 15 series set of courses. So there's a lot under the bridge already where you've got a good foundation. You say, okay, we're not going to jump in it as deep as you can study it if you understand more stuff. So it's a great place to start too. You should go, oh wow, then I've got these subtle distinction ideas, and then you can go back and learn some other things. You go, oh okay, I'm already thinking mind only, I'm in a way, I'm paying attention, I'm working hard. Okay, so I think we covered most of that stuff. So things are not ultimate. So ultimate meaning an understanding of how things really work. And so if you have that experience, you understand pen and chew toy at a quantum leap higher than pen and chew toy. You understand that process, emptiness. So I don't mean literally the pen and chew toy. I mean the concept of what makes it not a pen from its own side. That understanding, when you have that under your belt, all of a sudden this stuff becomes, wow, that's what got me here. Yes, this is useful. I understand. Because you get to, well, if it's not accurate really to understand the lower, they call them lower schools, is another term. The mind-only school, the lower schools, as opposed to the middle way school, the higher school. And they don't mean it in a derogatory way. Again, because you don't say, oh, that's the lower building. Those are just the bricks on the ground. It's like, that's your foundation. You have to understand that so you can put the first floor on, so you can put the second floor on. Same kind of thing. And most people, again, there's not a real school where everybody signs up and roots for the football team that's mind only, but if there were, the mind only people are pretty damn smart. Okay? Smarter than the average bear. Okay? So it would be okay to go to that school and learn everything they teach. And in fact, if you go to a middle way monastery, like the Dalai Lama would go to, or Saramay Monastery, which is now in India, it used to be in Tibet, if you went to one of those monasteries and studied there for 20 years, you would spend a lot of time learning the lower schools because it's important. And this particular set of teachings, this interpretation, comes in the monastery after you've learned lots and lots and lots of stuff about the higher school. Then they say, okay, we're going to go in our room, lock the door, and figuratively, and we don't go back to that school. You close that door. You're in this school now. You got to think differently. And it's a struggle to go, but wait a minute. It's like, oh yeah, that's right. These people are thinking this way. So you're putting on a different hat. So that's a little bit about what you're thinking as you go and you learn these things. So ultimate or totality, those are synonyms that they'll use in the middle way school for emptiness, penenchutoi. When the Buddha was speaking the second turning, what did he mean by that? Well, he says in the third turning, constructs, you got to go back and look at the three things. Constructs are the things in our mind, like, oh yeah, I have a picture of the Eiffel Tower, or there's a three-headed purple elephant in the room. Do they have a nature of their own that's ultimate? In other words, that thing can get me out of suffering. No, they don't exist. They can't have a nature of their own. They can't have a nature of being ultimate because they don't even exist. They're just mental ideas. Okay, so that's what he's saying. Well, that's one of the things I meant when I said things that don't have a nature of being ultimate. Then you got to apply it to we'll skip the second one. The second one was the dependent things, the changing things, the things in it, like the acorn that has causes that help it grow. We'll get back to that one. So then he talked about the third thing is that if something dependent things are changing, they can't be ultimate because they're changing things. Okay, so those are the ways of looking at that. Okay. All right. All right. Some other things that the Buddha said in the second turning of the wheel, and then we go back and look at them. So he said, nothing exists. Nothing that exists has any nature of its own. That's all the stuff we covered in the first class and this class. And then another thing he said was, nothing that exists ever grows. So you go, well, what do you mean nothing that exists ever grows? What do you mean by that? So then you go back to the three things. What about mental images? The three-headed purple elephant. Does that grow? It's just an image in my head. It doesn't grow. Okay. So that's what he meant. For those kinds of things, sure. And then what if something is ultimate? In other words, ultimate reality, emptiness. The pen is empty of being a pen coming at me. Remember, this was last week. It's coming from me. So that's its emptiness. Does that kind of grow? So the factory, they're putting the parts together, they put the last thing, and they go, okay, it passes quality, it writes, it's now a pen. And then over time it becomes empty of being that pen, and then eventually now it's empty of being that pen. As soon as the pen comes into existence, it's 100% empty of being a pen from its own side. It's coming from me. I'm the one that puts the pieces of the pen together and say it's a pen. Okay? So I could be looking at this and saying, this is perfect. This I will put on my kayak on the deck and put a stringer on it and use this as a toggle for holding the gear on my deck. It's a perfect deck toggle. It has an extra little clip for me to put. This is excellent. I just thought of that. I just made that mental construct in my mind. I applied it to this item, and it's now a deck toggle. Is it empty of being a deck toggle? Well, you still see it as a pen, and the dog still sees it as a chew toy. So it isn't kind of empty anymore. It's still empty, 100%. So that doesn't grow. It is or it isn't. Now if I destroy this, I put it in a food processor and make it just powder, it's not a pen anymore, right? Does it have the emptiness of a pen? No, because it's not a pen. So the emptiness of it goes out of existence. It didn't shrink and get old and kind of wear out. It came into existence and it went out of existence. So it didn't grow. So that's what I meant when I said things don't grow. Oh, okay. So you see how you apply them to the three things that he's talking about. You go, oh, okay. But again, this is wearing the hat of the mind-only school. Okay. I know, it's a lot to keep track of, isn't it? But it's fun. And if you put this under your belt and then you go and you listen to like a really sweet teaching about compassion or other emptiness or other things, you go, oh, okay, wow. This is like jumping in the deep end, and then you're like hanging out in the jacuzzi going, oh, this is easy. So I gotta give you good credit for that. All right, so that was the second thing that he said on Vulture's Peak. Another thing he said was, nothing that exists ever stops. And so some people go, what do you mean? If nothing exists ever stops, you mean my suffering is never going to stop? That's what he said. There's no eyes, there's no ears, there's no nose, there's no suffering, no cause of suffering, no ending suffering. Nothing ever stops. And he's like, well, what I meant by that was, let's go back and think about it. If there's a mental construct, that was the Tibetan akunta, of a three-headed purple elephant, it didn't start and grow and stop. It's just a construct. It doesn't even exist, so it can't stop because it didn't ever start. It's just something that's in my mind. It doesn't exist out there on its own. So yeah, of course, it doesn't stop. And what about emptiness? Does the pen, which is empty of being a pen from its own side, I see it as a pen. I'm forced to see it as a pen by my karma. The dog is forced to see it as a chew toy. Does that stop? No, it's as long as there's a pen, it's always going to be empty of being a pen. Okay. I know, you gotta think about it. You go, oh, okay. Okay, so nothing stops. That's what he meant. He's saying, that's what I meant by that. And then what about the things that are dependent on their causes and conditions that are constantly changing? He didn't answer, he didn't say that. But like the acorn. It stopped being an acorn when it became a sprout. And the sprout stopped being a sprout when it became, of course, they're changing. I wasn't talking about those things. They're always changing. Right? See? Oh, okay. And the mind-only school's going, of course, see, the Buddha made, okay, that's what you meant when you did all that crazy. We thought it was the altitude. You're up at the top of Vulture's Peak and there was low oxygen. Oh my God, we're getting worried. Okay, now it starts to make sense. Now we understand. Oh, okay, good. For a minute there, we thought you might have lost it. Too much life is suffering talk. Oh, you went to your head and you just went to the other extreme. Good, thanks for explaining that. Okay? And he said all existing things are extinct and have been so from the very beginning. What does that mean? Explain that one. Okay, well, we'll go back. What were the three attributes that the mind-only school heard him talk about and look at it, each one? The kuntak, the mental construct, the idea of the three-headed purple elephant in the corner, stomping around, making noise. Well, it's a mental construct. It doesn't exist. So it's extinct and has been so from the very beginning because it doesn't exist. Okay, well that's easy, right? Okay, I can buy that. Now what about the emptiness of the pen? It's a lack of something. It's a lack of a pen nature. So emptiness is there are things that exist, and then there are lack of things. There's ways of describing things. And we describe emptiness as a simple lack of something. It's not a thing, actually. It's tricky because we're using words. Well, it's love. Well, emptiness is a thing that da-da-da, and we look for. And another way of describing or talking or grasping, or not grasping, reaching for emptiness or attempting to achieve an understanding deeper of emptiness is called, in Tibetan, the word is gakcha. It's the thing that we look for, that when we look for it, because we think we know what it is, and we say, well, if it's there, that's where it would be, and I look for it, and we come up empty. So we look for something, and we come up empty. Now, it was a really interesting one. Somebody was going to bring a handheld wireless microphone to an event. He said, I'll let you borrow that. Sure, great. And then he called me. He said, I'm going to be late. I can't find the belt pack for it. And I'm saying, it doesn't have one. He goes, well, wait. And he had mixed up several different microphone things, and he's thinking, well, I found this part, and I found this part, but I can't find the other part for it. I was like, it doesn't exist. You can look forever. You're never going to find it. I said, that's great. You're looking for the gakcha. It doesn't exist. You're looking for something, and you come up empty. It's like, wow, I found it. It doesn't exist. It's not there. I can't find it. So when we look for the pen, that's a pen by itself, it's just sitting out there in the world being a pen. And I walk up and I go, oh, a pen. And the dog walks up and goes, oh, a pen. You go, well, but see? You go, well, that doesn't exist. The dog doesn't see it as a pen. It's not a pen from its own side. But that's what we think is out there. So when we talk about gakcha in Tibetan, which means the thing which you deny, and we talk about it in terms of emptiness, in other words, the Buddhist understanding of things have no self-nature of their own, it's what would we look for if it existed? We can't look for the real thing, because like the three-headed purple elephant, that pen that we're looking for never existed. Never did, never will. But we think that it exists. And that's what we get in trouble with. Because just like the pen that's out there is the angry boss that's out there, or the spouse who's starting to be a real annoying pain in the ass. After, it lasted 6 months and now they're just a jerk. Now I see the real them. They're out there. Where are they coming from? They're coming from me. But I look for it and I go, where's that boss that's angry at me from his own side that wasn't caused by the causes I put into place by being angry to somebody in the past? It doesn't exist. We can't find it. But we look for it. And Lama Root does this all around the world. He gives his teaching and he'll say, annoying people aren't annoying from their own side. And he goes through the talk and, somebody inevitably a number of times, probably enough people have heard him now, they know not to do it, but somebody will raise their hand and go, well, I know somebody that is just annoying, that really is annoying. And he says, what do they think we're going to do? Like all get in a bus and drive over to their house and visit them, and everybody at the teaching is going to go, yeah, that person really is annoying. There's the one self-existently annoying person. Everybody would see him as annoying all the time, unchanging. And we go, well, no, that's not true. I know that's not the case. But in the moment, they're being annoying, and we forget that. And we fall back on, they're just annoying out there, coming from them to me. They're annoying me instead of me remembering, oh yes, I'm seeing them as annoying because I've been annoying in the past. I planted the seeds to see them as annoying. But not everybody sees them as annoying. What about the wife who, yells at the husband? She's annoying, right? Well, not to the sister-in-law. It's about time she stuck up for herself. That annoying jerk, he's been pushing her around too long. And she's going, finally, yeah, she's doing a good thing. So right there you go, well, that's yet another example of how things are empty of being the way we think they are. Self-existent. Coming from their own side. So that emptiness is different than something that's changing. Something that's changing doesn't have that nature. You know, something that's changing is changing. The lack of annoyingness to the thing that's annoying us from its own side is 100% always there, as long as the thing is there. But then you can really get deeper into it and go, wait a minute, if the thing is changing, then the thing that's annoying isn't even the thing, because it's, you know, it's like, wow, you can really go deeper and deeper. So we'll just, you know, they say matak machepa in Tibet. It's like, no, don't go any deeper than that. Let's just leave it at that. You know, because we're talking about the pen, you know, this cylinder, it's a pen or it's a chew toy. So we go one level deeper. Well, if it's not a pen, the pen's coming from me. What's the me that the pen is, what's the pen that's coming from me attaching to? There's something out there, right? There's not just, I close my eyes and I say, stick of gold, didn't work. You know, there's something out there, and I'm attaching pen, the dog's attaching chew toy, or projecting, we say sometimes. So the cylinder, we'll just call it, you know, this thingamajig. The dog sees a chew toy, I see a pen, and it's a thingamajig. But then you can, we talked about this a little bit last week, you could break it down and go, well, the thingamajig has parts. So it's not even a thingamajig. It's really the clip and the pushy thing and the ink thing and the rubber thing. But then you go deeper. Well, the rubber thing has this part and the thread part. And it's like, well, you can do that in meditation. You go on retreat for a weekend or a week or 2 weeks or a month, and that's all you think about. And then you finally go, okay, I give up, uncle. I get it. You know. And then you go, okay, the thing is a pen or a chew toy. I don't need to go any deeper than that because I've done it enough. But you got to do it at some point, you know, go deeper. But we don't even go that deep. We go, it's just a pen. It's just a jerk. The guy cut me off. He's just a jerk. Well, no, it's a car driven by a human who you see as a jerk. Yeah, but he cut me off. You know, and we think that it's out there. And we come around and go, yeah, see? That's the mind-only school. It's out there, and I'm putting my projections on it. We fall back to mind-only school all the time. That's like, you know, if we're good Buddhists, that's our default position, you know. Yeah. And that's pretty good compared to most people, because at least we're saying, well, okay, I'm ascribing pen to the thing. You know, I don't need to go any further. Oh, well, you know. But most of the time we just forget and just think it's out there.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
He cut me off and that's bad.
Yeah.
So he could be on his way to the hospital.
So let's go a little bit deeper with a part of it. We'll talk about the construct. So we use the imaginary. I keep pointing to the. So let's see what it looks like on the video. Look over there. I can move the camera. It's not anything over there. They'll all agree. There isn't actually a three-headed purple elephant there. It's just something, a construct we made up. Now let's look at the construct pen. Because we're in a modern society and we have pens since we've been born, yeah, maybe they were ink and you had to dip them in the inkwell, and, you know, or nowadays most kids don't even know that there was such a thing like that, or, you know, you had to fill it with ink, or, you know, it's just a pen. Everybody knows what a pen is. They've just always been around. But they weren't always around. At some point, somebody put all the pieces together and it became a pen. So the construct of pen that I project onto the thing is a construct, and it actually doesn't exist. Now the same, so we talk about the three-headed purple elephant, we go, that's just something in your head. That's a construct. And then you can go, okay, you're sliding in a little bit, we can talk about the pen. You know, there's the stuff, the plastic parts, the ink, the clip, the pushy part, and I call it a pen. Someone else could call it a chew toy, someone else could call it a, you know, an ice pick or a weapon. Okay. So that's coming from me. But what about there's in Tibetan, there's a name, Teshi. We'll call it Joe. We'll just say Joe, because we're not Tibetan. What about the name Joe? Now, I don't know who Joe is, but let's think of a person, a couple, husband and wife. They're married. She's pregnant, so for 9 months, they're seeing her get bigger and bigger, and they're expecting a baby. And then the day comes, go to the hospital, the doctor is there, and she delivers the baby. What comes out? A baby. Now again, we're playing with words, so that's a construct and other things, but we won't go any further with that. We'll just say this baby, which is a thing, it's made out of bones and muscle and skin, and it's very red, and it's all slimy and dirty, and it's got hair, and it's got a mouth and eyes and nose and toes and fingers, and it's moving around, and it looks, it's got a little pointed head, and that starts to take shape, and it does its thing. The doctor looks at it, and the doctor doesn't think, oh, Teshi, right? Well, I slipped back to the Tibetan name because that's what Geshe Michael did, and I listened to him. So, Joe. The doctor doesn't go, oh, Joe. It just says, oh, baby, successful baby. Or might be thinking, cha-ching, there's the new boat. I just earned enough money because this was like on a holiday weekend or something. It just sees a baby. And the mother and father see a baby, right? And they take it home and they take good care of it. Nowadays they go home, the next day. And so they're at home and they're holding the baby and they're feeding the baby and they're watching the baby and, oh, I think it looks like Aunt Sally. Well, it looks like, Uncle Joseph. Oh, let's call him Joseph. Yeah, we like that. That kind of suits him. Let's try it on for a day. And then a couple of days, it's like, okay, Joseph. And then the uncles come and cousins come and the grandparents come and they go, oh, let's see the baby. Let's see the baby. Oh yeah, here, hi, say hi to Joseph. And it's now Joseph. So the construct that has been created when you say Joseph is now taking shape. When the baby came out, it wasn't Joseph. It was just a baby. And the doctor didn't think, Joe! Because it had no clue. Like I knew somebody who named their kids Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So the doctor didn't think, oh wait, it's going to be one of the 4, what were they, apostles? Is that what they were called, right? 4 apostles. The doctor just saw baby. And over time, the parents gave it a name, and then the construct, Joe, is what they relate to. This is where it gets really tricky, because then you can start saying, well, wait a minute, the baby gets older, and so Joe got older. I have a new construct. Well, we're talking about the construct Joe, and there's also teachings where sometimes they use car, a car, the car. Can use pen, the pen, a pen. They're different, subtle distinctions. So Joe is not baby, and Joe's going to get older, right? But you still have a construct that doesn't change called Joe. You go, well, wait a minute. I see Joe and it's a baby, and a couple years later I come back and visit, now it's a big baby. Then I come back a couple of years later, it's a little kid. Then I come back and Joe's in school. So it has to be changing, right? So you say, well, I have a construct, and you can debate it. You got to think about it. Go, wait a minute. I saw Joe, Joe's a baby. I see Joe, Joe's in college. So, of course, my construct changed. Then you got to ask yourself, if your construct changed, that means Joe baby, we'll call it Joe baby, is one construct. Joe college student is a different construct, right? How can you say Joe changed? Because Joe can't be Joe baby and Joe college kid. So there's a construct that's bigger, like an umbrella bigger, than Joe baby and Joe college kid. That's the Joe that we're talking about, that you've created when you saw, oh, Joe. Or another, and so one of the things that happens when we do these, we hear these teachings over and over and over again, and we should rejoice in hearing them over, not, oh God, can't you tell us something else? This is what happens. People go to an incredible scholar, a wonderful teacher, and they complain. Well, he teaches the same thing all over and over. I've heard this already. We should be thinking, oh yes, thank you. Drill it into my head until I really, really, really get it deeply. And Geshe Michael would say, oh, you're going to have like 2,000 or 3,000 hours worth of teachings on this. And Lama Wu was counting them up at one point. He said, I think might be getting pretty close. And just then, Geshe Michael was like, yeah, you're going to have like 10,000 hours before you get... And he's like, wait, I thought it was getting close. In Tai Chi, we say it's all about repetition. You do a move in a form. You do it over and over and over again. You say, oh, how many times do I have to do it, teacher? Well, a lot. Well, how many? Well, the first 1,000 don't count. And you go, right, okay, so I got to count to 1,000, and then I throw those away. And then it's like, when you start thinking about that even more deeply, you go, you don't get it, and you go, okay, I did 1,000, and those don't count. Now how many do I count? It's like, well, the first 1,000 don't count. You don't get it, right? So keep doing it, and then something happens. So another way of thinking about these teachings is, emptiness, constructs, over and over again. You just keep thinking, drilling down, going, oh. And then another thing that happens is we will hear something like pen and chew toy or karma or something. We'll go, well, that's different than what I'm used to. Maybe I don't buy it. Maybe I think it's awesome. Maybe a seed ripens and we go, wow, I want to know more. Or maybe we just go, I don't know. I'll think about it. And at some point, someone's going to do something, and something will be annoying. It's just an example, and like somebody at the grocery store, and you'll want to yell back at them, at the cashier. They'll having a bad day, and you're not thinking any of that. You just go, that person, well, and you're about to yell at them, and a little voice in your head goes, remember that class where they said the annoying person's coming from you? And you go, and immediately the other voice pops up, well, no, they're a jerk, and they shouldn't do that, and that's not right, and I handed them the money, and and it's like a devil and an angel debating in your head. So you have now gotten enough teaching to permanently, irreparably tear at your ignorance of how the world works, or it doesn't work, your ignorance of misunderstanding it. And it's just a matter of time. Little by little by little. Now, if you study really hard and you practice really well, you can get it done in this lifetime. If not, it could be, they say, as many as 3 incalculable eons. Now, an eon is, then there's little eons and great eons, and if you take the number 10 and you put 59 zeros behind it, that's how many